recording in the progress now. Don't you guys be grassing me into Tony, or he'll be wanting to fight me at 4 p.m. at the school gates tomorrow. So for the benefit of anybody who's tuning into the replay, we're covering the C major scale: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 octave. And we're looking at the first three notes: the root C, the second D, and the E, which is the major third. We'll now refer to these as 1, 2, 3. Sounds bright, sounds happy. Spend a few minutes creating as many melodies as you can. Now, here's a timeline of what will probably happen. After maybe 3 different little combinations of notes, maybe 10 seconds, you might have the thought, there's nothing else I can do with these notes. I've exhausted all possibilities. But I can assure you, you could spend all day just playing those 3 notes and using dynamics and slides and phrasings and different pickup selections or whatever, different tempos, and you could come up with an infinite amount of different variations of those notes. And that's the challenge, right? Where do I find the replay? Sandy, each time the lesson is uploaded into the exact same part of the circle at the Andy's Wednesday class, and so this would be guitar lesson number 11. And if you go into that and click on it, you'll notice there's a comment section where I will upload the link to what will be an unlisted YouTube video of this call, minus the first 15 minutes. I do apologise. So, now the minor variation, right? We flattened the third. C, D, E flat. Wow, the whole mood just changed. It's a whole different world. It's a whole different song. Now this could be the genesis of a song. Like, you don't have to start with any lofty ideas. You don't even have to have a chord progression. You just have to have a mood, a feeling, a vibe, a riff, something that makes you feel like, okay, this matches the way I feel, I've got something to say. And I mean, this is really putting it a bit black and white, but some days are more, and other days are more, and some days are a little bit, and then as the day progresses it becomes a little bit more, and then maybe later on that day it becomes, and maybe just before you go to bed it becomes. So these things work together. Some of you may remember, since we're talking about the thirds, that the minor third and the major third, or the flat 3 and the 3, the classic blues sound is both of them. It's also the classic country sound. Here's a good point where we can talk about the difference in styles being related to do with tones. The blues might be more of a warmer tone, like, whereas country might be more bridge pickup. Same idea, same vocabulary, different tone, different vibe, different style, but we're speaking the same language. Okay, now we're moving on to the fourth, the perfect fourth. That would be the note F in the key of C. C, D, E, F. Now what I'd like you guys to do is practice going from the C to the F. C, F. Now to me, it's bright, cheery. It's not, this can almost sometimes be kind of cheesy, really kind of bright, but the fourth is a little bit more ambiguous. It's definitely not dark and sad, but it's not necessarily bright and happy. So we could say that there's an element of tension. Now, let's look at the new series of options that we have with just a few notes. I can go C, D, E, E, D, C. So the E note is the stable note, the bright note, the happy note. The second, the note D, is slightly tense, but that provides attention. excuse me, which we can resolve. Now let's see what it sounds like if we approach that note from above, from the fourth, from the F note. It's a different vibe again. I'm still landing on the C, it's still happy, but there's just something different about approaching it from the fourth. Now this isn't something that you can find in a book, this is something that you discover through experimentation by using your ears, right? Here's the D. So there you go, there's the next hour of practice. How many different melodies, feelings and emotions can you evoke from just those 4 notes? Remember this, in any key there are only 7 notes. It's an illusion because of all the different shapes that there are lots and lots of notes. I think we all know that. There aren't lots and lots of notes. There are a grand total possibility of 12. And if you just play all 12 of them, it sounds what we call atonal. And if you're into Stravinsky, that might be what you're looking for. But most of us are looking for tonal, what we call diatonic sounds. And there's only really 7 that we have in any particular key. We've just played 4 of them, which is over half of them, right? So let's see what happens if we make it minor. So far, for the first 4 notes, the only difference between the minor and major scale is 1 note, and it's the third. If we flatten the third again, we get C, D, E flat, F. What does it sound like if I go C, F to the flattened third? I mean, that's a whole vibe. If there's any Ry Cooder fans in the house, I'm thinking of a particular film. I can see you nodding your head there, Greg. Cool. If anybody's seen the film Paris, Texas, right? In that film, there will be scenes of the desert, nothing happening, and all Ry Cooder has to do is go, and it sets the whole scene. There's a whole vibe. There's an experience. And he got paid a lot of money to just play those 3, and nobody plays just 3 notes just like Ry Cooder. Let's try C, D, E flat. It says something in that most ambiguous of languages, music, but it does say something, and it says something different than. But listen to how well they work together as well. Then. What I'm subtly trying to invite you guys to think about here is that it's not just, music isn't just major or minor. We're not just trying to think of the right scale to play major or minor. These things coexist together. What is major then? Major is the optimistic, bright element of music. Minor is the more melancholic, dark, deeper element of music. And life has a mixture of both of those things. So great melodies do as well. That's why in the blues we have these little blues bends where we're hinting at maybe, like from an emotional standpoint, what is that, right? That's C to an E flat, and I'm doing a little blues bend. What is that? Well, that's bending the minor third until it's almost the major third. It's taking something that's kind of dark and sad and adding a little bit of optimism to it. Not just, which is almost more country, right? In country, we tend to go full optimism. In the blues, it tends to be a little bit more grating, a little bit darker. Now, all I'm trying to do here is to find words for the experience of music, but I would encourage you to do the same. Like when you're learning these things, what do they mean to you? What images do you conjure when you think of them? Because if you can tap into that, then the day when you're feeling a little bit melancholic but you're optimistic about the future, you might know how to evoke that from your instrument, and that's, to me, the greatest gift of all. So let's move on to the next note in the scale, the major scale, C, D, E, F, G. Now this is what we call the fifth, the perfect fifth. Now the C and the G together is what's otherwise known as a power chord. it's a stable note that doesn't really say much. It's nice, it's stable, but it's kind of uneventful. Until you start to move somewhere with it. Let's try this. We're going to go, this is what we call a pedal point lick. I'll keep returning to the C note. C to G, C to F, C to E. Let's try this one, right? I'm going to go C, G, C, F, C, G, C, E. And notice how the first part of the melody, tension, what's going to happen next, resolution, in an optimistic sense. Now what happens if we invite our melancholic friend, the flattened third, into the equation? C, G, C, F, C, G, C, flat. Then we go C, G, C, E. It's a melodic, emotional journey of only 5 notes. So, next up, the A note, right? This will be the 6th of the scale, and there's 2 different kinds of 6ths. Let me just say on the subject of the 4th, we have a perfect 4th and we have a perfect 5th. There's a flattened 5th as well. We'll just avoid that for right now. We're talking about the major and the minor scale. The flattened 5th appears in the blues scale, but we'll talk about that later. So we're going to miss that interval out. We're going straight to the 6th. That's C to A. And it's called a major 6, and it has a certain kind of, I find it hard to find words for what it is, but it's kind of bright, but it's kind of like, I don't know. But it feels a certain way. To me, it's just a 6, right? Maybe you have some better words for it, right? Let's compare it to the flattened 6. That would be the A flat. The saddest of all notes. I call the flat 6 heartbreak, right? It's like, it's even sadder than the flat third. It's like, it's almost uncomfortable. But on its own then, see, none of these are what we call avoid notes. You just have to know how to handle. If they came in a box, it would say handle with care on it, right? Let's try this, right? We're going to go from A to G, and we're using the pedal point technique. To get our ears used to the interval jumps, that means return to C in between each note. And if it helps, you can just keep that anchored on, keep your finger on C, go to A, and then G. It's kind of bright. They say the 6th is not as happy as a major 3rd. It's got a slight tension to it, but it's like, you're not worried about it. Back to the G, happy again. The G in itself isn't very exciting, but it's a safe place to return to. Now let's try that flat 6, tension. Super dark, super sad. This would be the A flat on the 1st fret of the G string. Back to the G, the open string. A to G, A flat to G. Again on its own it's tense, but if you get used to it, like right now I'm just sort of following my ear and responding to how it feels. I always say that when you get your ears right, the music plays itself. When you're in the zone with it, when you're feeling what you're hearing, the next thing to play kind of plays itself. Now, I know you've all had experiences like that, where something is working and the next thing... Now, sometimes you might have an issue with, you heard an idea or you felt a direction, but then you lost it. Either you didn't have the technique to grab it, or you didn't have the fretboard knowledge to grab it, but there was definitely something was happening. And part of practice is when that thing happens, are you able to follow it? And there are variables that are involved in that, but I think this helps you to really kind of harness the notes, take the guesswork out of the notes. See, when you're playing a scale, all of the notes are not great notes to play all the time. They're all great notes, but they all have a mind of their own. I like to say each interval has an agenda of its own. And the agenda could be seen to be get to a note that's in the chord, the triad, right? So if we revisit what we've looked at so far, right, we've had the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, the intervals that are actually in the chord, the C major chord, are just the first, the third, and the fifth. Now, that's evident by the way you play the chord. Third finger, second finger, open string, right? So let's bring this down to a visual level as well. You can see the first three notes of the chord, C, E, G. Now, the second of the chord is a tension. Now, each of these tension notes wants to go up or down. That's it. The second, the note D, either wants to go up, C, D, E, or C, D, C. And each of those is a melody, right? C, D, C, D, C. Okay. The next note, the fourth, that wants to go up to the fifth or down to the third. C, F, E, or C, F, G. Each of the tensions wants to be released. Where does it release? To the triad, right? C, F, G, C, F, E, C, D, E, C, D, C. I just tried to demonstrate how it worked there, and everything I played to me sounded like a strong melody. Why? Because there is a logic to this. There is a sort of grammar almost to this, that if things lead to notes in the chord, it sounds pleasing and melodic. And if things stay on tense notes for too long, it sounds unresolved, you might call it wrong. Now, here's the punchline. When you get really comfortable with the feeling of those tensions, you can manipulate in the nicest possible way the listener by staying a little bit longer on those tensions so that you can get that reaction. Like I might go ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da, tension, da-da-da, boom, boom, Now, the more that this information becomes experience, when you're listening to your favourite music, you might not know exactly what intervals they're playing or what key they're in, but you'll recognise what they're doing. They're playing with tension and release. Like, they're moving from notes that are in the chords to notes that are outside, and they're playing with my expectation of when they'll resolve, so they've took me on a journey. Like when you're watching a movie, and it's like, a thriller, and there's a tension in the air, we don't know who done it or what it might be, and if they just gave you the information straight away, it'd be too easy. I mean, the most creative use of this might be the cliffhanger, right? You get to the end of the episode and it's like, I need to wait till next week to find out what happened. So create cliffhangers in your own playing. But again, don't do it by accident, do it by design. So now we've got one more note in the scale. This will be the note B. This is the major seventh. C, we'll play the C note and we'll let the B ring out. Now that's quite a tense note. It has its own kind of vibe to it. Let's compare that with what we call the flat 7, right? That would be the note B flat. That would be on the G string, the 3rd fret. I'm going to use my pinky tucked under. Right, it's kind of tense, but in a different way. It's kind of a little bit outer spacey. Think of a movie and we go into outer space. Uncertainty. Whereas it's kind of bluesy. Let's look at some chords that you may already know. If we take a C chord, and if you take your first finger off, you make it C major 7. Now when you add the other intervals into the chord, suddenly that B note makes the whole chord sound a little bit dreamy. On its own, it was kind of tense in the context of the chord. It's beautiful. So there's witchcraft at work here as well, right? C chord, C major 7. Now let's try the other one. You may know this chord as well. C major, but add the pinky on the 3rd fret of the G string. C7. You know, a kind of characteristic blues chord. So really the exercise, once you've spent some time looking at each of the intervals, is to go for a walk, as I like to call it. But definitely spend the time with the intervals. Like, most people's approach to playing melodically is just learn all the notes that work the scale and run up and down the scale and hope for the best. But if you spend the time to get to know each of the notes, let's say you're the coach of a football team, if you spend the time getting to know each of the players and getting to know the strengths and weaknesses of them, then you can put them in the correct positions, and so you can score more goals, right? And so if you think of your notes like that, and you take each one at a time and think about how you're going to phrase them, it's like you get deeper into the music. That's all I can say. It's not so much breadth, but more depth. And so the whole scale again. And then you just go for a little walk. Down I'll go. That's kind of tense. I like that. I'm going to play it again. That should be your modus operandi. If you like something, play it again. I'll do it again. Now I'm going to play some more notes. Tension. Tension. Okay. So, that's for the C major scale. Now, the last thing I want to share with you guys today is that all of the chords that fit that scale, that are in that key, can all be accessed right where you are right now. And where C is 1 on the C chord, it's not 1 on any other chord. It can only be the root note of C. If I play the D minor chord, which is the next chord in the key, then now the root note 1 is D. Now I don't want you to get too confused with this week, but I just want that to make sense that C can no longer be 1, the root note, because it's a D chord. D minor, D is the root note of D, the 4th string. Now all I want you to do at this point is to experiment with the fact that now the scale feels different. It doesn't feel the same as it did here, right? Right? But if I go D minor, it starts to feel like the chord, right? Dark, sad. Minor, right? We've talked about that today, of course. That's why it's a D minor chord. Everything's D minor now. The next chord in the key would be E minor. This kind of sounds a bit Spanish here, right? Let's go to the next chord, which is F. It's kind of bright, but it's a different brightness than the C chord. The next chord is G. Don't worry, I'll put these in the chat as well. Feels different. A minor, right? Feels different again. We'll leave the diminished one out for today. So each one of those chords has a different mood, a different flavour, right? So for anybody that's interested, the C major chords are C, D minor, E minor, F, G, and A minor. And each one of those chords has the same scale which runs through them. But the lesson for today is that it doesn't feel the same on each chord. And so if we only think about playing music in terms of information, the names of things, the shapes of things, the moving of fingers, then we kind of miss the point. It's sort of like if when we deal with language and storytelling or just conversation, if we place our emphasis on the words that we're saying and not the meaning and intent behind them, nothing gets done, nothing gets said. There are no stories that are told. Now, you can tell a great story with limited vocabulary, and you can tell a really bad story with great vocabulary. It's like, and much like a joke, timing is the element that's involved in a joke. It's never the words. In music, it's never the notes. It's always the ability for the person to evoke with those notes. Now, for anybody here who feels like today playing this part of the scale was too easy, that's okay, because the logic expands to cover the entire neck. It doesn't matter where I go. If it's a C, a root note, a second, third, fourth, everything wants to go to the root. Tension. You're waiting for, right? There's a sense of these notes having a direction. Now, for me, the confidence in going, again, I held back a little bit. If I go, I'm waiting for that, right? I waited a little bit too long there. Some of you might have went, wow, what's happening, right? But if you're thinking in terms of what you can see, you might go, and it's just not the note to land on, right? And so you think, my playing sucks. Your playing's fine. It's just a case of establishing in the ear the difference between the tension and the release. So yeah, this stuff maps to the most advanced jazz if you want. All that matters is this: whatever it is that you're practicing and you're playing, are you relating to it on an oral level? Can you hear what you're playing, and do you know how that feels? And that's where the magic is. I think for a few minutes here, we'll maybe open it up for some discussion. I'd like to know what some of you guys, what your feedback is on this. So I'm going to pick Sandy Fisher first, if you're up for unmuting yourself, Sandy, and getting in the hot seat. I don't know if you know how to do the old unmute. I think I can go ask to unmute. That might help you if there's something comes up there. And many happy songs still use chord progression like G minor C D when E minor is sad. Well, Sandy, I'll let you try and figure out how to get your mic off there if you're up for it, and I'm going to answer your question there, John. In fact, John, why don't you jump on if you're able to get your microphone? I don't know what's happening with Sandy's. Are you able to? Oh, Sandy's on now.
Yeah.
Right, I've got Sandy and John. Right, 2 seconds, Sandy. I'll get you in a wee second, John. I'm going to answer your question quickly there, right? And this will be useful for other folks. So G, E minor, C, and D. Why is the E minor sad? So remember we said the C and the B note kind of sound intense, but when you add the chord, it sounds dreamy. So again, there's a little bit of witchcraft involved. So that's dealing with notes. So we said that this could be a happy melody as well, right? C to F, tense, resolved, right? Let's think about your chord progression. The G's happy, but see if it ended on, it's sad. I've just left in a sad motion. But what makes it happy is so it's sort of like, this is kind of dark, but wow, there's light. I guess it's a game of contrast, right? Like in music, like in life, there's never really sad or just happy. Sometimes we only are able to express the happy through the sad.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a lot of really cheery songs that have minor chords. But here's one that's really weird, right? You get a lot of songs that are just minor, and because of the way they're played, they sound really happy. Like, what's it called? La Freak? Is it the Chic song? And it's like, a lot of funk music is just minor chords, and yet because of that upbeat kind of thing, they make you feel happy. So it's kind of weird. Some songs are major. Sorry?
Maybe it's a bit like our weather in England. If you didn't have all the bad days, you don't notice the nice blue days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess having in that turn, between G going down slightly, then you actually feel the positive
Absolutely.
going back up to the happier chords.
And I think, like, as most of you guys will be aware, like G, C, and D is like the 1, 4, and 5. Like they're what we call the primary chords. And if you only play them, it tends to feel a little bit cheesy. So that's why we end up with the 4 chord songs, like your example there, the 6th chord, the E minor. And I think it is very much like Scotland as well, by the way. But as I always like to say, if it's raining, it's a good day for the pub. And if it's sunny, good day for the pub. So either way.
Cheers.
Well, I've got you here, John. Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, not particularly, other than I try and get to these most weeks where I listen and I'm really enjoying it. So I've actually just, as of last night, went back to the very first one and trying to go through them again because it's so easy to forget. So I'm trying.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're having fun with them and hopefully learning
Yeah,
some stuff.
and
And
I like the method of that you're doing. It feels very as if you're teaching one to all of us
oh, well,
as individuals rather than being
that's awesome.
somebody just online. So yeah, it's good.
Oh,
Cheers.
that's so happy for that. Thank you, mate. Right, Sandy, can we get your microphone on? Awesome.
Actually, I don't know why it has my wife's name on there. Sandy would be a strange guy's name.
Well, you never. There's actually guys in Scotland called Sandy as well. I've got a friend
No
called
kidding.
Sandy, although it's spelt with a Y. So what is your what's your
Right.
actual name?
Douglas.
Douglas.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit more
So
masculine.
thanks for the lesson, Andy. I don't even know what to ask. I signed up last week
Did you? Wow.
and I'm working through all the lessons, and I've watched Tony on the free YouTube stuff for a long time, and then made the
Wow.
jump. And
Maybe I'll ask.
so I'm
I'll
doing
ask
a
you
little bit every day.
the questions. How long have you played for? How long?
Oh, I've poked a stick at it for years.
Wow.
I've poked a stick at it for years, and basically knew 3 chords, and just never really got serious about it. But 6 kids later, I'm getting serious.
Wow. 6 quid. 6 kids. You deserve a medal. So
Well,
what?
some people look at,
The lead guitar, is that something that you have a lot of experience with lead guitar? Is that kind of new or?
no, no. So I'm kind of enchanted with the blues.
Okay.
So Tony got me really interested in the blues. I like the feeling. I
Yeah.
like the expression that you can do with the blues. So that's kind of where I'm concentrating on now.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's been very nice to meet you, Sandy. Sorry, Douglas.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing your progress. And if you've got any questions, fire them into Circle. I'll be happy to help. Okay, let's get Martin Lane on if you don't mind. Hi, Martin. How you doing?
Yeah, Andy.
You're not going to tell me that your name's actually Joanne or something, are you?
No, it's not. But the door's open and the dog might come in very shortly. But
That's okay.
I mean, I got to 50 12 years ago and decided I needed a new life skill. So sort of played around and had a few lessons and bumped around after that. But yeah, basically just open chord stuff, singing songs and enjoying myself. But got to the point where I think, a bit like skiing, you reach a plateau and you think, well, I need to get beyond that and do something new and progress. And so, yeah, these lessons are taking me forward in a way that I'm enjoying. And I don't, I mean, for me, there's no difference between lead and rhythm. I don't play with, I'm not led by anyone, but putting sort of riffs on your chords and stuff, I think is where I'm hoping to get to, and slowly beginning, my eyes are starting to open to what's available. But, I'm sure there's a whole Pandora's box of stuff that waiting for me. And bite-sized pieces are great.
Sure. Where are you from? Where do you live?
I live in Hertfordshire. I've never been to Motherwell.
Oh, you're not missing anything.
And so, yeah, I mean, I've lived in the Caribbean for a few years, been back here for 5 or 6 years, and yeah, so I'm retired, and guitar is one of my activities when the sun's not shining.
Right. Well, awesome, mate. And I agree with you. I think that's important for everybody. Like, there isn't really a difference between lead and rhythm. I think really it's just melody, and rhythm is a better. Even when you're playing rhythm, like you say, like you can add things to chords, and even like what we were doing today. I mean, I'm sure everybody does things like this, but maybe what the discussion we had today can be eye opening in terms of understanding better why they work. Like, even if you take a C chord, most of you will be used to the idea that you can take the second finger off and maybe hammer it down. Well, what you've done there is you've introduced that interval, right? Now, some of you might also be familiar with, you can add the pinky on the fourth string underneath that. Now that gives you what we call this would actually be with the second finger off, it's called C sus2. With the pinky on, it's called C sus4. And then you put the second finger back on and you've got a C. Ba-da-dum.
Yeah, I've tended to hammer on the B string on the C note and the B.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, now I understand why it works.
Sure, sure. And most of you might know this one as well, when you can take the pinky and hammer it onto or fret it on the B string, right? At the third fret, that's the D note again. And so exploring within that little area, what are some of the combinations of things you can take off, things you can put on, and then finding little melodies in there. That's how you come up with a part, right, for a song. It could be... And I always say, it's like, if there's a jam situation, or it's a song that you're playing and you're just playing it on your own, you may already do this, Martin, that if it's like 4 bars of C, kind of the worst thing you can do is just go... It's kind of getting dull after 2 bars.
There's a song, Family of the Year, Hero, that starts off with 4 C's. And so I do try and embellish that, but yeah, putting a bit...
Great example. Yeah, that's it. Like, see that as an opportunity to create a little atmosphere and a vibe. Like, again, if this was like a pub gig and you walk in and there's a guy going, you're like, whoa, music, then you're like, right, where's it going? But if it was... It reminds me of the song The End by The Doors, and it has this real beautiful one chord kind of vamp with just certain notes being taken off, and it just creates this amazing iconic vibe. But it's like a lot of bang for your buck. You don't need to really know that much to do that. So with the chords I listed today, like all of those chords, you can start to look at adding and taking away things. On an F chord, a great one is take the second finger off too. Add the pinky. Another example for rhythm guitar could be using the scale to connect the chords using bass lines. So maybe... you hear that in like a song like Hallelujah, you've got the... whatever that song may be. So.
But am I, if I'm connecting the chords from the key of C, for example, am I always using the C scale, or am I also using...
From the key of C, yes, you would use the C major scale, so it would always be the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B through all of those chords. And think of it like snakes and ladders. Like, you can move any way you want as long as you get to where it is that you want to go. Moving up and down the scale is always going to work, but sometimes it can be more melodic to make little jumps, and everything to your own taste through experimentation, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome, Martin. I'm going to jump on and grab one more person today. Nice to speak to you down in Hertfordshire. Let's go for Billy. If you Bill W, not that's not a Y. There's my eyesight. Bill W.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you.
Hi. I'm just wondering why you're missing out on the diminished chord to bring everything back to C. It's
Okay.
such a beautiful, beautiful chord to kind of pull everything back.
An unpopular opinion from Bill W. I love the diminished chord as well. Most times I leave it out of this study because most people tend to tell me initially they don't like it. But Bill W. has a varied palette of tastes and I like it. So, for any guys that are interested in there as well, you have. Now, what you're playing there is a little bit more advanced. So that would be the B, what we call the half diminished, right? That's like a jazzy, a 4-note chord, versus the straight up diminished chord is like, but very valid. Now, for anybody who knows anything about this or who doesn't, this will definitely cover this in a subsequent lesson. Thanks to you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. And
Everybody's going to be mad at me now.
that's okay, but it's very related to what we were talking about. Like it's a form of tension, right? And if you have so I feel bad now. I'm even going to edit my initial comment there to include B diminished. So he who dares may win with that chord. Is there anything else that's come up today, Bill, that apart from my
Well,
black sheep?
just one of the things when you're working with the C chord and doing that hammer on, for me, the iconic song for that is "Into the Mystic." Remember the Van Morrison? Well, of course you know that song, but he hits the C and he keeps hammering that his second finger, and that's kind of the the key of the key of the song.
Shit.
And I don't mean the key,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
melodic key, but yeah, it's very. I'm still trying to master that, but it's his signature there.
Yeah, and it's amazing how such a simple technique can become so
Oh,
iconic, right? It's I think that's a really good point for everybody. It's like a lot of these things can seem as though they are like throwaway. It's just a couple of notes. It's just the scale. Let's get to the more difficult thing. And actually these little tools are what really create songs, iconic parts, and like your rhythm guitar playing goes up a level or two when you take any simple chord progression. Let's say it was, we'll keep it to C, A minor, F, and G. But if it's C, like if you have those little movements, suddenly this static chord progression becomes a melodic movement, a song. And I think the last thing I want to leave everybody with today is that going full circle with this, the studying of songs, what you'll start to notice more and more is patterns. Like 5 of your favourite, I mean, I'll tell you what, like there's so many songs have this chord progression. So this A minor going down with the G. I mean, like While My Guitar Gently Weeps. There's a great Led Zeppelin track, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. There's a fantastic song Rod Stewart sang on it In a Broken Dream, and that's gonna the same chord progression. 25 to 64 by Chicago, the same chord progression. Like you'll notice patterns. There's so many songs that are G minor, C and D, and there's so many songs that are C, A minor, F and G. My point is that the thing you take away from those songs is not the fact that it's the same old chord progression. It's like Bill just said, it's the same old chord progression with some kind of little movement, some melodic thing. It could be a bass line, it could be something on top of the chord, it could be a rhythmic thing. And so what does that mean? That means that whoever was exploring those chords to write that song wasn't thinking, right, this is just G, E minor, C and D. They were trying to create a feeling, a vibe and a mood. They were doing, you could say, playing from the heart, not the head. And so that's what I want you guys to do with everything we were doing today. Like, apply it to everything that you know. Have I really got mastery of the sounds here? Because when you start to explore it in more depth, time disappears and you end up finding this creative well, this inspiration of, like, you could just play forever and always find new things. And I'll tell you a signpost in your journey that can tell you that you need to try a bit more of that is if you're ever playing and you feel like you've ran out of ideas. There are no ideas to run out of. There's just getting stuck in, I've done that pattern before. I bet if you really listen to it, have you, somebody could have said, I'm not going to use G. Imagine if Bob Marley said, we're not going to use G minor, C and D. We would never have had Redemption Song. And how does he start that song? It's Redemption Song, right? But it's, I'm trying to think of another G, E minor, C and D. Like, this is G and E minor, right? But eventually it goes to the C and D when you go into the verse, but it doesn't sound anything like Redemption Song. Anyway, I'm going to let you guys go for a week. I'll post the call minus the first 15 minutes, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you everybody for your participation. Good night.